Yeah,
What's
what's up,
good?
sir?
How's
How
it
are you
going?
today, boss?
I'm doing well, man. I changed my environment, as you can see. We don't got to go into specifics on where I am, but there's a 3 hour time difference from where I was last week, so this is nice and early for me.
Location is remote.
Location's remote, exactly.
Nah. Well, cheers. Peace and blessings to that.
Yeah, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Had my breakfast. You already know, as soon as I have my coffee, and I know you're drinking some tea over there, I'm always ready for it.
It's neat. It's necessary, man. You gotta have something to kickstart the day a little bit.
Oh, entirely. Well, I kind of want T's beat to rock a little bit more. I give it like 30 more seconds. Because he just snapped on this, man. He really did.
He really did. That gives me some time to adjust this camera too.
Yeah, adjust the camera, do what you got to do. I like the scenery, the greenery in the back.
Yeah, we got some oranges hanging.
Oranges, okay. Are those in your reach? Or is my depth perception messed up? No.
If I lunged for him, I could get him.
No, that's rare. That is very rare. All right, I'm down to get started. Yeah, thank you everyone for. Let me turn this down. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to another session of You Think. I'm Eric Wilson.
I'm AI Joffrey.
There you go, AI Joffrey. Yeah, and we're here to just discuss things what's on our mind and things that we are thinking with you all. So that being said, today's topics, Election Day, because that is coming up in 2 days, and the next topic is also Apocalypse Now? ?
We'll get into that.
Yeah, we can get into that. So I guess I want to kick it off. I wanted to really just talk about and discuss Election Day. It's coming in 2 days, and I feel like this is the feeling that I have right now. It's similar to when it snowed the night beforehand, and you wake up that next morning just seeing if the mayor is going to give us like a snow day. You know what I mean? It's just like that anticipation. It's like we know what's already like out in the field, but what exactly is going to happen over these next 48, 72 hours?
Hold on, quick time out. Quick time out before you jump in. But that reminds me that there was something I saw which went viral on Twitter, I think.
Okay.
But there was a school district, I forget which district it was, but the superintendent was basically like, even though we're doing remote learning, we're still gonna have snow days because there's just something about that feeling that you got as a kid when it snowed. Are we gonna get it off? So they actually decided to continue with snow days even with remote learning. I'm sure there's also consideration with the teachers and stuff, but
Of course.
feeling you were talking about, I was like, yeah, that's necessary, man. It's like it's a good feeling when you're a kid when you wake up, there's just enough snow, you're watching the TV, especially back in the day, you'd be watching the TV.
Yeah, at nighttime, or even in the morning where they would have the cancellation at the bottom of the TV screen.
Exactly.
For some reason, yeah, there were times in which, like, I remember when we thought that we were going to get school canceled. It did not happen at all. It got down to a point where we were running for the bus, and everyone's like every other person's like falling in the snow in the middle of the street in order to get back up. The bus driver's just waiting there looking at us. They had to wrap chains around the tires. Yeah, there were times in which like we should have stayed home, but it's like, man, gotta get that in there because we didn't have this remote opportunity. So it's even nice for the fact that students will be given the option that they're going to keep that tradition alive.
Yeah.
Because if they don't go out and play, then it's just like, hey, like,
right.
They still have all the tools at their disposal. If they have the correct internet, and if their school.
That's a whole other topic for another. Yeah, anyway, as you were saying.
So I was comparing it to a snow day, not really knowing essentially like what exactly we're going to be going into, but a lot of positives that I am taking from this whole cycle in general is just how many people have actually gone out there and voted early. So it's like I understand, and I think I touched on this a little bit last week, and it's like I understand the fact that there were long lines, so on and so forth, but it's just like it's really powerful just to see people taking time out of their day, because we see people all the time, like waiting for sneakers online, you know what I mean? Or waiting for a concert or waiting for a show to start. So it's just like, hey, like you can wait in order to cast your vote for your democracy at that end. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I just want to just kick off a conversation based on the election, and it's hard. And the question that people have generally been asking is like, "Oh, who do you think is going to win?" I don't really think that's even an appropriate question to ask. More so than, "Hey, like, what are then the steps are we going to take post-election day to make sure people in the community, people in our lives, and making sure that we're good, you know, on a day-to-day basis."
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the voting early thing has definitely been super inspiring to watch. And past even just the act of like political participation, but more so
Yep.
just in terms of just like the communal, like drawing the line, you know? Like I feel like, and that's been sort of my concern throughout this presidency at times is like, where are we drawing the line? And I feel like like people are responding in this election and with the long lines and like the fact that, I mean, I saw a headline the other day where someone, you know, they voted by mail and they saw like they tracked it and they saw that it didn't come, so they drove 20 hours to vote in person. Like I feel
Wow.
like people are really just sort of saying, you know, like this is not, you know, like the question of sort of like what is America and like, you know, who are we as a people, and even sort of on my end, right? Like I'm more of a left-leaning thinker, so you know I'm not necessarily the most hype about the Biden choice or whatever, but even in terms of that, like you are seeing sort of why they went with Biden because of the fact that there is just like I remember I had a conversation over the summer and it was sort of the one thing that most made me like Biden, where someone was just like, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody who is a Biden supporter or whatever, but someone was just like, he's just such a carbon cutout that it's like, if it's Trump versus cardboard cutout and the cardboard cutout can't win, then we deserve whatever's coming. You know what I'm saying? And from that point of view, I do feel like to bring it back to what you were talking about, regardless of which, you know, person was who people voted for, because I'm sure not everybody even who's voted early voted for Biden, but I just feel like even the act of everyone turning out early is reflective of the fact that people are just like, yo, like we've had enough. Like this isn't like what America is supposed to be. Like, no, like, you know. And I think to your point about who's going to win and like whether that's even a point of conversation, like I feel like, and maybe I'm just feeling optimistic today, on other days I might not, but I feel like there's just enough, like the other side or the ops or whatever, they have all of the, you know, political power, but they don't have the social or cultural power. Like I just don't feel like in a fair election there's any way, personally I just don't feel like at this point in a fair election, if you were to just like open it up, you know, like who people want to be president, there's no way that this dude Trump is going to win. And so to your point, then it becomes like, well, what are we going to do post-election, regardless of what the results are, to continue with the energy of like, nah, this isn't what America's supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you know, a land of freedom and all the other stuff we're told.
You know what I am happy about? I'm happy about the fact that I haven't heard that same narrative going around like, oh, I'm leaving the country if he's voted in, you know, because I think that back in 2015, 2016, that was just like a huge topic of discussion. Right? And of course, because of COVID, people's options are people definitely don't have as many options anymore. But I feel like it's nice to know that, hey, like people are like, no, this is just as much mine as it is yours, and we're gonna just see what's gonna happen from here on out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was someone who was like for a while, like I mean, I mentioned I have a 3-hour time difference, but like the original plan was to be out of the country during this time, partially just because I wanted a change in pace and not even because of the
and it's good, yes, and it'll be convenient at this time too. Be good. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But even from the political side, like I do think a few months back I was a little bit more paranoid of like, you know, if this dude refuses to lose power, to leave office, and he refuses to give up his power, he does have, you know, like authoritative forces behind him. Like we know that the police want a police state. You know what I'm saying? So if Trump says you got to do this so I can stay empowered, I feel like it's not a hard question for the police, because the police want to abuse their authority, like, for the majority, right? So, or a few bad apples if people would prefer to think of it that way. But yeah, like I feel like, you know, with that aspect of things, I was worried a while ago, like, oh, how is this all going to play out? Like, is shit going to go down? Do I really want to? But now I think, having seen the voting early, and just having seen sort of over the past few weeks, like I feel like there's just this communal feeling of like, nah, like enough of this, you know, like just enough. And with that in mind, like now I'm really happy that I'm going to be here to regardless, like that's not to say that the election's going to result in anything positive and that there's not going to be, whatever happens is going to happen.
Positive
No
or
one knows
negative
what's
on
going
both
to happen.
sides. Yeah, we just don't know. Yeah.
We just don't know. But that being said, like I just feel like I feel more optimistic just because I feel that communal energy that no matter how this is going to go, like for me, my biggest concern was again that we would just that we weren't going to draw the line of like enough is enough, that we were just going to keep pushing stuff back.
And
And
sort
I
of
feel
keep
like
moving the goalposts, right?
exactly, and I feel
Yeah.
like politically that might happen, but with like people, with like the everyday people, that's just not going to happen. Like the Democrats in power might be cool with it, but the people themselves are not going to be cool with it. Like, no, enough is enough. Like you can't keep treating people the way that you've been treating people. And so with that in mind, like I feel more optimistic because at the end of the day, if the people are united, then I don't think anything can stop the people. So
Power to the people. That's what they say, right?
exactly, power to the populace.
Poppy, yeah. Shout outs to Tavares for sure. But yeah, I am happy that like for example, my grandmother called me this morning to be like, hey, I just wanted to make sure that because I think she filled out not a was it an absentee? She filled out essentially she's not going in person to vote. She was just like calling me to check like, hey, did you guys drop that off for me? And like every other year I haven't really heard her speak about elections or anything within the political realm in this way, So that was nice also just being like, okay, well even people who I don't typically have like political conversations with, that's at the top, or at the forefront of their mind. I also wonder if like is it because of the way things are now positioned? Oh, hey Maddie, what's up? Thanks for joining. I'm curious to see if it's because everywhere we are clicking, everywhere we're going, like I even logged on Google this morning and it's just like vote, vote, vote. I'm very curious just to see the way just like the media calendar is going to change, because also too like even it happens with holidays as well. You know what I mean? It's like we can go to like one of these what's it called, pharmacies right now and just see like they no longer may have any candy. Somebody it's probably going to shift to a little bit more of like Thanksgiving, Christmas theme.
Yeah, or even like it kind of feels like when every brand does their Black History Month stuff.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like I'm very curious to see like the way the narrative is going to change around or just gonna just shift next week. And I think that it's like there's just I feel like there's just three parts to it. It's like the conversations we're having like offline with our friends. There's conversations that are happening on social media, but then the conversations that are happening on these big media channels. You know what I'm saying? So I'm curious the narratives that are going to be.
Yeah, and I feel like that third narrative of the media, like I'm really hoping and feeling like.
And I hope they're just not. I hope it's just not like fear mongering too.
But that's the thing, though.
That's what I'm most afraid of.
I feel like it's gonna be fear mongering, but I also just feel I don't know, like, and again, maybe this is just I recognize that I'm changing scenery and like maybe this is me misreading the situation just based on sort of what my own position at the moment. But at the same time, like I just get the feeling that like if the media paints a false narrative, people are just gonna be like, no, that's not what happened. And in the same way, like if Trump claims a victory that seems sketchy, I just feel like people in general are going to be like, no, that's not what. Like, I just feel like there is just sort of like the same old tricks aren't going to work. So they can't. Fear mongering is the trick number one, right? So they fear mongered enough that I feel like I'm just not sure if. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be some section of the community that always just feeds into those people, but I also feel like those are the people whose voices and who's like, those aren't necessarily the people who hit the streets earlier this year when mass protests were happening and who wouldn't be doing it again, necessarily if it is, right? Because if you were at those protests, then you would know that the way that the media painted the protest was incorrect, right? So it's like, fear mongering isn't going to affect the people who actually are going to be the players in whatever happens post-election, in my opinion, either because of the people who are making, who are pulling the strings, or because of the people who see the strings being pulled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm also curious. This is like even like looking at it on the tech end, because I saw the president, he was going after like Google, Twitter, and Facebook for the past week, and just discussing how like they're like blocking or not really discovering and uncovering the truth. And it's interesting just the way sometimes like blame is just like dished out, you know? So I'm also curious to see if like, because we also know the way that these algorithms move and sort of target certain ads or certain messages or images to certain demographics based on the analytics. So I'm also curious to see if on the back end, if they start changing things a little bit. Because there's sometimes in which like I'll wake up and like if I do check Instagram, I see sometimes more of my friends' posts than I do like ESPN or House of Highlights, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know if that's because of my activity on the media platform that previous week, the night before, or that given month, what they decide to start pushing forward. So I'm also curious to see if there's also just like more so of a positive or more optimistic tone that's then pushed out to the world.
I could see that. I mean, I know what that made me think of is the fact that like in terms of like the new tricks that they do that
Yeah.
people do pull or that the media does pull, like people the powers that be do pull. It's like even I don't know, the section of folks who like the algorithm is so important where it's like even it's like no longer enough to just I don't know I'm not quite sure the best way to put it, but it's like the distrust in the media, right? That you know people in the like free community are more likely to have is not the same as the distrust of the media that people who support the president, etc., are likely to have. But at the same time, they still both have that mistrust in the media, right? Like I feel like that's sort of the other game that gets played is like people who is like the powers that be being like, okay, you see this part of what we're doing, but we're gonna let you see this part of what we're doing, but present it in a different light. And so that to your point, right? Like fear mongering isn't necessarily like a big concern on my end, but I do think what you said, like there's other ways that they can that the algorithm can play out where you think something because of the fact that the algorithm is showing you that. You know, that's definitely we always run the risk of that, and like that's a tactic which already has been proven to work.
Entirely, yeah.
In these sorts of ways. Also, just as a side note, I like how you called him the president instead of saying his name. I'm gonna start doing that.
I mean, there's no free for.
The incumbent is the best way to put it. The current Republican nominee.
The current Republican. You know what I mean? We just don't. I just try to give the proper titles. What's it? That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that was just something that was on my mind. I don't really have much else to really speak on it, but everyone, please just continuously go out there, vote. Continuously go out there and just make sure you're talking to others in your communities. It's like what we see in the when we're on a flight. You know what I mean? It's like you got to put your oxygen mask on before you can help others. So just make sure that everyone that you're doing what you could do in order to empower yourselves, in order to empower those around you, whether that's reading, whether that's making sure that you're taking those mental health days, whether that's making sure like you even wake up in the morning and drink a smoothie, something that's going to directly affect your mood. You know what I'm saying? Just make sure like you're just taking care of self for sure.
I feel like I was on the plane and like I feel like every time I hear the oxygen mask thing now, I just think of that theory. I'm like, it's real. That's real. But then I'm also, and then part of me too is also like, who are you to say that, right? Like if you're the parent, this is a whole aside, but like literally I'm
down.
But like,
yeah,
I'm like, who are you to tell a parent not to take care of their kid before they take care of themselves? You know, like anyway. My other question.
And as you know, it's like it's people's first reaction. Like, oh, let me make sure my kid's safe. But then you put it on the kid, and the kid's looking at you like, "Do I put this on?" You know what I'm saying?
True. You know, an event happened that made them add that part in.
Oh,
something happened with it. So
it's the same thing. Like even with when they give hot beverages, how they have to put caution, really hot or hot on it now. That wasn't on there before, and someone ended up suing. I think it was, or allegedly. I really don't know. Let me just. It doesn't even matter.
Someone could look it up online.
Exactly.
My other question though would be, so like I know last time, at least I remember a good amount of folks who like went out to bars to celebrate, etc. Like watch like, and then had their whole nights messed up by the reality of what was said again. So I'm curious, like, what is your, where were you when you found out the results of the last election, and like, how do you plan on setting yourself up like this Tuesday, like while, you know, past the actual voting, like once the results start rolling in, like how are you going to plan on taking that information?
So I guess there were two questions. I'll answer the first question on where was I? I was in Harlem watching it. There was an election watch party. We're all just watching what's happening, and you can just see. And it's funny too because they've done skits on this too. It's like you can see people's moods just start changing over the night, or people start running those calculations. Well, we can still win this state or this state or that state. That was happening in real life. That was probably some of the most accurate skits I've ever seen in my life that expressed reality across the board. So it was definitely a similar sentiment like that. I know I had some of my friends who were just like, oh my gosh, the market is going to be tanking. I'm going to be losing so much money. So there was just like a lot of chaos and confusion. And I think it was just like a lot of just like disruptions of reality. I heard a lot of people actually that night too in the area go on like rooftops or even outside and just like, it was similar to like that 7 o'clock scream that people were doing in the middle of the pandemic, where they just had to just like blow off some steam. So I definitely heard a lot of people just like shouting and just getting some of their frustrations out. But what I did end up seeing though was there was an awakening in a way where we all kind of just looked around at each other and just realized like, oh, okay, like this is what we were told. This is what we began to believe, and this didn't happen. So now 1 + 1 wasn't really equaling 2, you know?
Yeah.
And I think once that reality started happening, it sort of fostered an environment for people to just sort of take a step back and reevaluate sort of the way that they're feeling about life, or the way that they're feeling that things should and could be, you know?
Yeah.
What was the second question?
Well, so I guess it's like, if that was your reaction last time, then
Yeah.
how are you setting yourself up now that you know that 1 + 1 doesn't necessarily equal 2?
Like I was saying, it's like over time I've begun to not really set expectations of things that I can't control. You know what I mean? It's like there's only a certain amount of things that I can do in order to possibly change the direction of this election. It's like if I go out there and vote, that's like I'm doing what I need to do. So beyond that, it's like I can't really set any further.
Well, I meant more so. Hey, what's good?
What's up, Q? What's good?
I meant more so like literally like, you know, in terms of the information coming in, right?
What's up, Q?
You know, last time you were at the election party, you know, I'm assuming with COVID that you're not necessarily doing that, but like, what's your plan as far as?
Oh, got you. If I want to be peeping on TV or just like looking at.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like we're all gonna find out. You know, it's not like, are you tuning into the game?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Am I gonna be tuning in? To be honest, I really have no idea. I really have no idea if I'm gonna be watching or not. But what I do know is like there's gonna be times in which like I'm gonna be grabbing my phone, going on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? There's gonna be times on my phone in which like the night that I'm gonna be on Instagram, but tuning in as if this is some watch party. I may do it actually. I may actually have just different news channels on and watch them interpret the same results. That actually may be a thing. But what I am very curious about is just to see what the president begins tweeting, or even what some of the Dems are tweeting that night as well. And I think that's going to be a moment in time for everyone to be able to sort of pay attention to and sort of test the waters. How about you? Are you going to be watching, tuning in? Are you going to utilize that as an opportunity to go just pick it on the beach if you could?
So last time was interesting because like I obviously had the same sort of mental reactions that you were talking about of like 1 + 1 not equaling 2. But like physically I voted in Massachusetts in the morning, hopped on a bus, and came back to my apartment after, which was like a really interesting way. Like I'm on the bus looking at tweets like, oh, that's not looking good, pull up.
Oh wow. After you already wow.
Yeah, so like I was literally, you know, like in transit as the results were rolling in. By the time, you know, I got back to New York, it was pretty clear things weren't going the way that I had hoped, or at least I had expected, or at least hoped.
Yep.
But you know, I went back to the crib. That was you know, everything tumbling down in terms of like, I'm going back to New York. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, like this time, honestly, like, I mean, and I also would say, like, I admit that this is sort of from a place of privilege. I can even say this, but my plan is to really just try to disconnect, as much as possible while the results are rolling in, and then, check in sort of like literally like my plan. I mean, we got some U-free episodes in the tuck. My plan is to literally be editing a U-free episode. So like completely heads down, like, and then just checking the evening and see what's good, because it's like, I feel like you set yourself up a lot of times if you are, like, to your point, right? Like, we were all doing these, okay, well, we didn't get that, but we calculating, like, okay, but that could happen, or like, so I don't want to put myself through that, because at the end of the day, like, there's nothing really accomplished from that. You know what I'm saying? You're just rationalizing
whatsoever.
So my plan is to really.
And then you start putting on your own emotional strings. You know what I'm saying? For no reason.
Exactly.
And so then you start playing these mind games, and that's gonna just that may just dictate the way you may feel on that Wednesday or that Thursday. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's like, is that gonna allow you to be the most productive citizen that day? You know what I mean? Is that gonna allow you to sort of give out the love, and sort of comforting feelings that you may need to give out to others who aren't as privileged? You know what I mean? To be able to disconnect. So it's like, yeah, it's like, how can we just make sure that we're going through these good mental checks for sure?
Exactly. And it's irresponsible, I feel like, to like go to the extreme of that, of like, I don't want to call any of my homies irresponsible, but I have a few homies who I feel like would more be on the wave of like, they might actually be able to make it to like a Thursday or Friday without knowing who won the election. Like, I'm not trying to be like that. Like, it's important, like, it's definitely, we need to know who won, who claimed to won. Like, we need to know how this is going to play out. It affects everybody. But at the same time, it's like, until we're at that point where it's like, this is what happened, like, you don't necessarily need to watch. Like if we are talking about the game, I'm gonna tune in for the fourth quarter. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to see
entirely.
First three. I'll check the score. All right, word. Like, it looks like a close one. I tune in. Hopefully there's a game winning shot.
No, entirely. No, I actually like that analogy to compare it to like a sporting event, and sort of like, even with basketball, it's like this, especially like when we're looking at something like the All-Star game, for example. Like, yeah, the first quarter is going to be nice. It doesn't really, like, you don't really have to watch the second or third quarter, but 5 minutes down the stretch with, you know what I mean, in the fourth quarter, you have to tune in.
Got to, exactly.
What exactly is happening, because that's when things are really going to be shifting and narratives are created at that point.
So yeah, we'll see what happens, man. I'm sure next week we'll have plenty to dissect and talk about again.
I know, right? Yeah. I know, and that's what this is also interesting. I feel like this is an interesting point in time that we're even discussing this or capturing this, because it's like one of those. It's like back in April, and we couldn't have predicted that this is the way November would be right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're no longer wiping down groceries. Like, you hopped on a flight. Like, this just like, we weren't able to predict this, because like a lot of it we can set these expectations, but at the end of the day, we have no idea what's about to happen. But I definitely do feel like it's interesting just to be able to talk about it from this perspective and from this point of view, and to look at it in this lens of what will happen, because when we do check in next week, it's going to be what is, you know what I mean, or what has happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, I'm true firm believer in that. Everything that's supposed to happen is going to happen regardless, and it's part of the experience. There's good, there's technically good, there's technically bad, but I feel like a lot of it's just experience, to be honest.
That's real. I mean, that kind of segues into my topic this week.
Mm-hmm.
So all these dots connect in my mind. We'll see how well they connect as they come out of my mouth. But so on Friday, Busta Rhymes, Brooklyn's own Busta Rhymes, hip hop legend, underrated by myself included, as this album sort of proved, right? So he just dropped a new album, which is a sequel to his 1998 album called Extinction Level Event. And this is Extinction Level Event 2. And, the sort of context that the album operates in, and particularly the intro to the album, but in general, the whole album operates in, is this idea, right? Which, like, is certainly not only coming from Busta Rhymes, that it's like, plagues, we got, you know, like fires, we got earthquakes, like the corrupt, like all of the corruption in the world, basically just like the world is ending, like apocalypse is now, like, you know, like it's like the end, you know, like you used to see like end is near signs, like I feel like you're seeing like end is now signs, like things are happening, right? And that's sort of
end is near compared to end is now.
exactly. Like I feel like that I've seen that more this year, right? Where it's like 2020 has just hit us with so many different things that people are you know, certainly religious people in general, but even like jokingly, like I mean, I remember we shouted out Varo earlier, but I remember when Jay Electronica dropped his album, it was the start of the pandemic, and we were like, yo, it's the apocalypse if Jay Electronica's dropping an album. So like, you know, there's been just this, and there's been sort of this energy, and also one of my favorite albums to drop this year was by Spillage Village. Like their first single was called End of Days, but then Days was spelled D-A-Z-E. So there's just sort of this energy out there of like things are, you know, like apocalyptic, you know, like shifting. Yeah. So that's the context the album operates in. But I want to talk about the first song in particular because I thought it raised like a few different things that came to my mind, and so there's a few different people who are on it too on the intro. So all right, first off, you got Busta, right? So in his verse, Busta talks a little bit about how, like, you know, when he made Extinction Level Event, it was because he watched the movie Deep Impact, which was about an extinction level event, the end of the world. I think it's like an asteroid. I've never seen the movie. But then he was so like moved by watching it, like, oh, the world is ending. And he ended up making the album. And he mentions in the song, right, he's like, Morgan Freeman was president in that movie. And he's like, fast forward to 2009, when the movie 2012 came out, which again is about like the apocalypse, the world is ending, right? And Danny Glover is president in that movie. And then he's like, and meanwhile, Obama just got elected. And then he's like, now Obama's out of office and supposedly the world is ending. And he doesn't necessarily make those connections in terms of like, you know, anything like beyond just like, isn't it interesting?
It's interesting, yeah, to look at.
Yeah. But I feel like, you know, my takeaway from that is like, it is kind of interesting how much the end of the world is sort of played to us in media narratives, you know, and it's like, why are there so many movies? It's like, I mean, I guess it's just like, I watch some of those movies, so I guess it is just sort of like interesting to watch about. But
how many times can they remix a zombie movie though? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly, yeah. And like, there's sort of, you know, there is sort of like interesting dots to connect of like, oh, okay, especially in '98, right? Like there was no black president. You make a movie where there's a black president and the world is ending. And then 2009, right after Obama gets elected, you make another movie where the world is ending and make sure it's a black president. So it's like interesting dots to connect as far as media narrative, which we've certainly talked about, you know, in the past. So that's the first part, which is kind of just sort of like interesting, you know, interesting coincidences, I guess, right? Then on the same song, in the intro, Rakim is on it. Legendary.
Oh yeah, Rakim on it.
Bro, you got Rakim on the intro. And what's cool too is that the way that the track list plays out is like he features people even when he samples them. So I thought that the Rakim was going to be a sample, but he actually got a new verse from Rakim, which is crazy. And he like, but in the verse, Rakim kind of does the same thing of like, he even shouts out certain Bible verses, basically just drawing the connection of like, hey man, like if you look around, like all the stuff that was predicted way back when, you know, fires and earthquakes and plagues and all that stuff that signal the end of the world, you know, they're here. Like if you look around, like you can draw those connections. But then in his verse, he sort of frames it in this context of like, well, the meek shall inherit the earth, right? It's like that's what they say, right? So it's like the end of the world itself isn't necessarily like, you know, the way that it's framed doesn't necessarily. It's more so like if the world continues to operate on corruption and evil, then ultimately that's going to lead to the end of the way that things are, kind of. And it's like that's sort of like I think he literally says, and again, like this album came out on Friday, so I'm doing the best to but I think he literally says like the meek shall inherit the earth, and he's like, to me meek means like the politically powerless, right? Like the, you know, those folks. And it's like, well, now, you know, even bring it back to the election, we are seeing this sort of energy of like, yo, enough is enough. So I think that's always a good framework, where it is like, for the people who do have this sense of doom and gloom, it's like, well, what is the doom and gloom really? It's like, you know, if you are framing it in that context, which actually brings me into the third sort of point, He also has Chris Rock on the intro. And Chris Rock, I'm gonna quote what he says, but I'm gonna switch one word because I can't say that word. But he's like, "There's only 5 years left, homie. There's only 5 years left, homie." So at that point, you're like, "Oh shit!" So now 2025 is the apocalypse. Like whatever. Like, there's only 2 years left, homie. There's only 1 day left, homie. And then you're like, okay, where? So I see what you're saying. Where it's like, in some senses, like we don't know when our last day is, right? Like we don't, like the end is coming, in the sense that the end for us is eventually coming, and we don't know when that day is going to be. So really, you need to operate with that mentality anyway. You need to not be scared. And that, to bring back in the Rakim part, it's like, well, the end of, I think Rakim ends his verse with like, it's the return of the gods, the end of Satan. And it's like, all of this sort of energy that I was getting from this song and this album just made me really think about like the framework that we do mentally sometimes with like the negative signs that we see, and how like ultimately like approaching it from the context of like, well, yeah, it's over for them. It's over for the people who are doing the evil things. It's over for the corruption, etc. I don't know what my end is going to be. The end could be tomorrow. It could be 5 years from now, whatever. So I'm going to just kind of focus on what I can control and move with that energy. So I don't know, again, like, I feel like they might have connected a little bit more in my mind than what I just said. I think you follow.
Yeah, no, I follow that. And like, even when we go back to like thinking about like the end of the apocalypse, so on and so forth, I feel like it could just be the end of the way we know the world that's currently functioning. You know what I'm saying? Like Corona, when that hit, that was the end of a time. That was the end of a reality that we currently knew, where we all had to like physically be at the office, or students had to physically be in the classroom. You know what I'm saying? Like that world is no longer the reality anymore, because now we can delve between both of these worlds. You know what I'm saying? Or even when people are looking, or it's like, even when you look back at songs like Party Like It's 1999, because people thought that it was going to end in 2000, but what that ended up being also was like the whole .com boom, the fact that we all have now access to information on the palm of our hands,
Yeah.
And I feel like with this, it's like, thinking about from Chris Rock, when he was saying that perspective of how like, homie, we only have 5 years left, 2 years left, 1 day left. It's like, we all really don't know when our time is on this earth. So it's just like, when we then begin to think about even like some verses that say like, oh, the meek shall inherit the earth, it's like, the way I can now interpret that is, if the powers that be were corrupt and sort of taking advantage of other lands and resources, if the powers that be that existed in this form and fashion, if they can't exist in the same way, now the people who they were sort of exploiting for their resources, if they're no longer exploiting for their resources anymore, those people who could be considered the meek are now inheriting their own land back again. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's just the end of the previous lifestyle. It's like new ideas and reality that's popping up.
Yeah.
In there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly like sort of what I was thinking, right? And I like what you said about, it's like everything is ending and beginning at the same time. Right?
Exactly. So I don't think it's like the end of like the physical realm as we see it, but it's just like a shift in the way we go about things. So now, for example, on Tuesday could be the end of the way we do or conduct politics here in this country. You know what I'm saying? Because now after that election, there may be a general consensus. And I think this is already something that people are already thinking, like, hey, like electoral, like we probably shouldn't do that. Let's have it straight up on popular vote, or just like remembering the fact that these are supposed to be the United States of America. And there's not like, what the hell is red? What the hell is blue? It's just like, we're all supposed to be one country. And I think that when people start realizing that, or start remembering like, hey, we're all supposed to be here in order to just make sure we're all doing the best that we could, you know what I mean? Making sure that we can get to that top spot in education, making sure we can get to that top spot in healthcare and infrastructure and tech. If we can all just utilize our resources in that way and remember, hey, this is the reason why we're supposed to be country people, you know what I mean? In order to just make sure that we can live the best lives that we could here, while also welcoming others with open arms. I feel that that's what it's really going to be about. Just a different way we saw reality. Because the world kind of did end it in 2016, for at least for me, from the way that I take in media sources. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't take that as like a book of law like I did before. You know,
Yeah, the interesting thing too about the Bust album is that in the first one, I think he predicts that the world is going to end in '01, and then 9/11 happened in '01, and that certainly was the end of the world in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, like, well, first off, the red and blue thing is red and blue, red plus blue equals purple, right? So that's why Kanye's doing the whole purple thing, because like low key, that's genius.
Yeah,
Regardless
no,
of
that is fire. That was kind of fire. Yeah.
But yeah, I was also gonna say, like, I do think a lot of it sort of comes from like this idea. So there's a saying that once upon a time is the once upon a time is the ending of every story, right?
Oh.
Or you could flip it, right?
Because
like,
then it's like
ever,
talking about.
or you could flip it, right? Like happily ever after is the beginning of every story. Like ultimately the idea of beginning and end really only exists in narrative. Like there was the world before me, and like if I were to, if the world ended for me right now, like things are going to continue to move. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I recognize that certainly the end only has to happen once, right? Like, and like there is like nuclear weapons, and like the stakes are a lot higher than they have been in the past. But at the end of the day, like the concept of beginning and end really is a concept that we invent to like conduct a narrative, or to like just like frame, a framework of how we engage with the world. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, once upon a time is the ending of every story, and happily ever after is the beginning of every story. Like you can tell a story up to a certain point, you can be like the end, but there was still a moment after the end where something else happened.
Oh, I
That's
like
why
that.
there's so many sequels.
Yeah, that's why there's so many sequels and prequels as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a reason why somebody could create a prequel of, hey, how do we get here? Because things build up to a certain point, and then also after, like, hey, where do we go from here? After,
you could take the longest book, like I don't know what the longest book or series of books, or even like take something like I don't know. I feel like
GOT.
a popular book for our generation.
Give me the GOT. Game of Thrones.
GOT. Yeah, GOT is a great example. I was gonna say, like, I know a popular one for our generation is Harry Potter, right? It's like we got 7 books of that story, and you could easily be like, what happened before the first book, or what happened like you could never put to page the expansiveness of the human experience. You could never really, like, the human nature is so, humanity is so expansive, even beyond the nature of time. There's even just the fact that it's like, me, you, and then like billions of other people also experiencing the world at the same time. Like it's infinite, all of it, and then all of those people having different thoughts, and like, it really is infinite. And we do a lot where we try to, we have to sort of, to maneuver through the world, try to like put a certain like, framework, or like a certain like fence around it, to like, okay, this is how but at the end of the day, like, life still exists beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's also why I appreciate Humans of New York so much, because what that has allowed me to see is like everyone has their own backstory. You know what I mean? Somebody could have just came from the hospital, or just come from like winning an award, or got off the stage somewhere, and they're on their way to their next journey. I think that sometimes, because we're so caught up in our everyday life, we forget the humanity in it all.
Exactly. But yeah, that's sort of what I got. Also, like, y'all should just check out the album. Like,
yeah, I gotta check out that album. Yeah, I'm gonna I'm playing that out.
Because Bust is one of those ones too. Like everyone knows. Like nobody. Like Chris Rock has another line later on the album where he's like, "You don't want to, like, you might have done this or that, but you don't want to go after Busta Rhymes." And it's like true. If you think of how long a Busta Rhymes concert would be, just if he only played the hits he has, like. So it's interesting that like he's never necessarily put in that conversation of like one of the greatest MCs, whatever. But at the same time, like, he definitely came through with an album that's like, hey, here's who I am. Like, y'all need to recognize my legacy. And also at the same time, just like had dope music, dope beats. Yep. Like Kendrick's song is crazy. The Anderson .Paak song is dope. The Rick Ross song, bro. All I'm gonna say about this Rick Ross song is that once Busta's verse ends, he literally starts laughing, and he's like, that was like, run that back.
Yeah, okay, so, that's good.
Even
say it again.
I was just gonna say he even brought Mariah back for another collab with Mariah, and Busta and Mariah, every time they've gotten together, it's been heat.
That's, that's facts. And the interesting thing too, I feel like what you were saying about like Once Upon a Time, Happily Ever After, that applies to even when artists drop music as well, whether it's their first album or the one that they deem could be their last one, because it's still, after listening to that, you can still go back and just hear, hey, what was it like? Where did this person start off when they first making music? Like, what was their life? What was their experience about? What was their current reality? You know what I mean? Okay, what shifted for them to then think about and discuss these things in this fashion?
Yeah, interestingly, I saw something about how Jack Harlow is like,
Mm-hmm.
there's like some sort of like mini controversy around Jack Harlow because his team is getting rid of some of his old music, and some people are saying that it's because he like raps a little bit differently, and like nowadays he raps like a little more like, I guess, like a typical rapper. Like some people would call it a black scent, but personally I've never necessarily looked at his music like that.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, he's getting rid of some of his old music, and some people are like, yo, that's weird. But I'm like, no, like everybody get like, I've got like, I'm not even an artist and I've gotten rid of my old music. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a
Yeah, I
natural
make
like
things private on
separation.
YouTube because I'm like, this is not my reality anymore.
Exactly, and it's funny because there's a saying that people say where it's like, you have your whole lifetime to make your first album, but at the same time it's like, what is your first album? Like Kendrick, for instance, right? Kendrick's first album was Good Kid, Mad City. Like he didn't have Section 80,
Or
OG,
overdose, OD, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Overly
or
dedicated,
even
yeah.
the Kendrick Lamar, or even started off going by K Dot, right? Like so, like you can always trace it back. That's kind of unrelated to the end of the world, but I'm glad we're on this topic too.
Nah, no, it's real, and I don't think it's a bad thing for people to go back and sort of adjust the way that they want to present themselves to the world, because in the end of the day, it's kind of just like, hey, like, yeah, I created this music, yeah, I created this movie, so on and so forth, but like, I created this, I'm putting it out in the world, and since I'm putting this out in the world, I also have the complete right to remove it from your reality that currently existed. You know what I'm saying? It's like that. I mean, that's pretty much what it is in the end of the day. It's like, why are people, and also too, like for those fans or for whoever else was like upset about the fact that he's then going backwards and like pulling off songs, screen record and keep it for in your tuck. You know what I'm saying? If it's that important to you, or if it's like, why is that even it's interesting too. It's like, why is that even a conversation when someone decides to do with the art and work that they created? You know what I'm saying? Like for those people who feel that type of way, it's like, what have you created in this world and presented it? And if you have done something like that, has there been a time in which you removed it from your narrative? I feel like we all do that. I mean, there's times in which like I'll go back on Twitter and be like, I said this. No, I'm just gonna just delete it. There's nothing crazy, but it's just like I don't see the world in that way. And it's like when we're looking at something like the internet and the way internet currency exists, it's just like nothing's ever deleted per se, but like if I don't want to have this be sort of a dot that's then going to be connected to me down the line, it's just like, let me just scrub this away, because at a certain point you're going to be able to, regardless. I don't know, I just feel like people should just be able to just do as they please with things that they contribute.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you think about like moments in time, but it's like past moments in time, right? Like it's like there's certain songs back in the day that, okay, here's an example. We don't have to go super on this topic for too long. Because speaking of time, I know we're pretty deep already, but like if Kanye nowadays doesn't swear in his music because he's religious, because of his religious current state. That was a weird way of saying that, but whatever.
I know what you mean.
But if Kanye were to go back and scrub all of his old music, which is impossible, right? Like, because everybody, it's available. You're gonna always be able to find Jesus if you deleted Jesus off of streaming services. But regardless, say he did that, right? It's like, in one hand that would suck, because for us it was like we enjoy that music, it sounds good, and also because we associate, at least in my opinion, it's like I associate it with like a moment in time, etc., etc. But it's like past just the moment in time, there's also that experience itself, right? And it's like, as this creator of the work, there is a different moment in that experience, because it's like from the recipient, the audience point of view, the experience was like the first time I heard it. But for the person who made it, it didn't take 3 minutes to make a 3-minute song. It took a lot longer. So there is
and as artists, we know we've heard those songs for a while before we put something out there. We listen to songs at least 50 to 300 times before we press like, okay, publish into the world. You know what I mean? So it's like we've heard those verses that we've created plenty of times before the rest of the world gets to judge it for those 3 minutes.
Yeah, so you definitely have a right as a creative, I feel like, to take ownership over your work, and if your old work doesn't resonate with you, then you don't have to keep it out there. But also, like, in the case of someone who does have a big audience, you also have to recognize that it's like, you know, the cat's out the bag with that one. Like, people gonna have
Yeah, no, entirely.
That's all I got on that topic, though. But I'm curious if you got any Sunday shout-outs this week.
Sunday shout is going to be a little bit similar to the way I was shouting everyone out last week, but a huge shout out to people, like to poll workers, people who are sort of giving their time to make sure people have the opportunity and a chance to cast their vote. So it's like, shout out to all the volunteers, definitely taking time out of their day in order to help volunteer and manage on that end. Time is the most valuable currency that we all have, so I definitely do appreciate that. How about you?
That was a great summary. I don't really have too much to add on that, so I'll just shout out Busta Rhymes again.
Shout out Busta. Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited to listen to this album, and yeah, no, this was great. I'm looking forward to stepping into whatever this new world that we could be stepping into or not next week. Yeah, I'm just curious just to see like what's gonna happen, because I feel like at the end of the day we can only control what we can control. You know what I'm saying? So just making sure that we're just taking care of those around us, checking in with those that you love. You know what I'm saying? Because going back to what Chris Rock said, like we not to leave it on like some morbid thing, but it's just like we just never know. You know what I mean? So it's just like end of the day, just give thanks, stay blessed, and stay prayed up for real.
I was gonna say it's funny because the way I don't want to spoil the song or whatever, but there's plenty of Chris Rock on the album. But but the way he flips it into Busta too is it's like today could be your last day, and guess what? You get to spend your last day listening to a Busta album. You lucky motherfucker.
You don't sound this is real jiggy. It's nice. It's clean.
But there is sort of that feeling, right? Of like, you know, if it is, you gotta live like it is your last day, and like, you know, make sure that you're enjoying what you're engaging with and doing what you can.
Yeah, just spend more time listening, watching, and reading what you actually enjoy. You know what I'm saying? Instead of being thoroughly affected by the thoughts and opinions of others. I think I even told you this before. Like I used to look at Rotten Tomatoes a lot for like movie reviews, so on and so forth. And I remember they gave one of my favorite movies like a 20-something. I'm over here like, I don't care the way you guys are rating things after this whatsoever. You know what I'm saying? Because a movie that I hold dear to my heart, like that's 100% on that end. You know what I mean?
You gotta stay true regardless of what the outside forces. And I feel like to sort of cap it off though and bring it back a little bit. I also feel like the important thing is being present, right? Because it's like if you knew, right, like that an asteroid was coming to Earth and you only had 10 hours left, you would be present for those 10 hours. You would be aware of time and how you're spending your time and where you are. And I think that's what, to me, living like it is your last day, like that to me is really what it comes down to. Is it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean go all out and like high stakes on everything necessarily, or like go purely hedonistic and enjoyment, but just like be aware of the time and how you're spending it. Because at the end of the day, we all have a certain amount of finite time left for ourselves in this existence, and we don't know how long that's going to be.
So all we can do is just go out there and enjoy, drink more water, chat with friends and family, and just do what we love to do. Right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We'll be here every single Sunday for more conversations. Shout out to all of you guys who have tuned in. Shout out to all you guys who are watching this, who are not currently in here on the live. We definitely do appreciate you taking the time to get a little bit more insight on what we're thinking about on a week-to-week basis. And yeah, like was mentioned before, we're not here to control the narrative. We're here to free the narrative. So peace and blessings to you all until next Sunday.